Beneath the moon's unyielding gaze, a lone heartbeat echoed against the frost, weaving life from the jaws of oblivion. Erin Frostvale stumbled through the veil of the frozen border, her breath a ragged plume against the endless white. The wind howled like forsaken wolves, clawing at her threadbare cloak, but she pressed on, one hand splayed protectively over the swell of her belly. At 21 winters, she had known the pack's warmth only in fleeting dreams. Now, exile stripped her bare, a branded traitor cast into the realm where the Deuce's mercy froze solid. The accusation still burned hotter than any hearth. Seducing an alpha without the elder's blessing, a sin that twisted her hidden tryst into treachery. She had not sought him out, that shadowed stranger in the patrol's disguise, his touch a storm she could neither summon nor forget. But the council saw only scandal, their verdict swift as a blade, banishment with the pups she carried condemned to the ice alongside her. The border was no mere line on a map. It was the North's scarred frontier, a wasteland of jagged peaks and crevasses that swallowed the unwary. Eternal winter reigned here, the snowdrifts eternal tombs for those who dared cross. Erin's boots crunched through layers of rime, each step a betrayal of her weakening body. Hunger gnawed at her insides, a feral beast sharper than the cold that seeped into her bones. She had rationed the scraps from her last meal in the pack's hall, dried meat and withered roots, but they were gone now, vanished into the void of her journey. Fever flickered at the edges of her vision, a haze that blurred the silver-threaded horizon, yet she could not stop. To falter was to die, and the lives within her demanded more. The moon hung low, a sickle of pale fire slicing the night, casting long shadows that danced like specters across the tundra. Erin paused at the lip of a ruined outpost, its stone walls half buried in snow, remnants of some ancient watchtower from wars long silenced. The Deuce's light bathed the structure in ethereal glow, illuminating carvings of lunar wolves etched into the frost-cracked facade, guardians of the threshold, or so the old tales whispered. She touched one faintly, her gloved fingers tracing the grooves, seeking solace in the stone's cold memory. But there was no warmth here, only the wind's lament and the distant weevo of predators circling the gloom. Collapsing against a crumbling archway, Erin curled into herself, drawing her knees to shield her abdomen. The pups stirred faintly, a ripple of movement that was both miracle and torment. She knew not their sire's name, only the intensity of his gaze that night, eyes like molten gold, hidden beneath a hood, promising a connection that defied the pack's rigid laws. Had she known he was Edric Stormborn, the Alpha King himself, would it have changed the Council's decree? No, she thought bitterly. Kings were bound by duty, and Omegas, like her, by silence. The fever surged then, a wave of heat clashing with the chill, sweat beating on her brow to freeze in crystalline trails. Her lips cracked and bled as she whispered prayers to the Deusa, invoking the goddess's hidden paths, the Pathfinder's gift, said to guide the lost through shadows unseen. Yet doubt coiled in her chest, tighter than the blizzarding gale. What strength was this, to birth heirs in desolation? The pack had named her seductress, a vessel of shame, but in the quiet of her exile, Erin felt the truth bloom like blood on snow. These pups were her redemption, fragile flames against the encroaching dark. She imagined their eyes opening to the world. Would they mirror her own stormy gray or carry the stranger's fire? The thought anchored her as delirium tugged at the edges, visions of the pack's fiery hearths fading into the white expanse. Night deepened, the moon climbing higher, its light refracting off the ice in prismatic shards that pierced the ruins like accusing arrows. Erin dreamed fitfully, her body a frail barrier between the pups and the frost's embrace. In her haze, she saw the Deusa's silhouette, a wolf woman with eyes of endless night, murmuring of destinies forged in sacrifice. But awakening came with pain, a low growl echoing from the shadows, eyes gleaming yellow in the lunar glow. Predators, drawn by her scent, the vulnerability of impending birth. She clutched a jagged stone from the ruins, her symbol of defiance, a shard of the watchtower's moon-carved wall, its edge biting into her palm, drawing a thin line of blood that steamed faintly in the cold. The beasts circled closer, their paws silent on the snow, breaths fogging the air with predatory hunger. Erin's heart thundered, a drumbeat of resolve amid the fear. She would not yield, not to the wild, not to the council's cruelty. As the first wolf lunged, she swung the stone shard, its arc a desperate prayer under the moon's witness. Blood sprayed across the white, hers mingling with the beast's, and in that visceral clash, a spark ignited. The Pathfinder's whisper, perhaps, urging her deeper into the border's heart. Dawn crept in reluctantly, gray light bleeding over the horizon. But Erin lay spent, the predators repelled for now, her body racked with shivers. The pups kicked stronger, as if sensing the fray, and she wept silent tears that froze on her lashes. Exile was not mere banishment. It was a forge, testing if mercy could temper the blade of survival. In the ruin's shadow, with the moon's fading echo, Erin Frostvale clung to life, unaware that her trial was but the prelude to a revelation that would shatter thrones. The wind's mournful dirge carried the scent of iron and frost through the border's desolate veins, as if the Dusa herself wept for the fragile thread of life suspended in the ruins. Erin awoke to a world sharpened by agony, the gray dawn yielding to a pallid sun that offered no warmth, only the cruel clarity of her isolation. Her body, a vessel of fire amid the ice, convulsed with the first true contractions, ripping through her like the claws of the wolves she had barely repelled. The stone shard lay clutched in her bloodied hand, its moon-etched surface now smeared with crimson flecks that had frozen into dark jewels against the white. She had survived the night, but survival's price demanded more. The pups, insistent and unyielding, pressed toward the light she could scarcely summon. Hours blurred into a haze of torment, the sun climbing its indifferent arc before sinking once more into twilight's embrace. Erin labored alone, her cries swallowed by the howling gale that battered the outpost's crumbling walls. Sweat and blood mingled on the snow-packed floor, steaming faintly before crystallizing into a macabre mosaic. The Deuce's moon rose again, fuller now, a silver shield bathing the ruins in luminous mercy. In its glow, Erin's world narrowed to the primal rhythm of breath and push, her mind adrift in visions of the stranger's touch. That fleeting night when duty's chains had loosened and passion had bloomed forbidden under a similar sky. The first pup emerged with a slick rush, tiny and mewling, its fur matted with the red of birth. Erin gathered the fragile form to her chest, her trembling fingers clearing airways as instinct overrode exhaustion. A son, his eyes flickering open to reveal irises of molten gold, mirroring the fire she remembered from that hooded gaze. Wonder pierced her delirium. Not her stormy gray, but his, the Alpha's legacy, etched in miniature. The second followed swiftly, a daughter with the same luminous stare, their cries a duet that echoed off the ice like a challenge to the wilderness. She wrapped them in the remnants of her cloak, her body spent, heat fleeing as the cold reclaimed its dominion. Fever raged unchecked now, her vision swimming with shadows, but in their tiny warmth against her skin, a spark of purpose ignited. These were no mere pups. They were her defiance, born in exile's forge, their golden eyes a symbol she could not yet fathom. As night deepened, Uivos, distant and probing, circled the ruins once more, but Erin had no strength left to fight. She curled around her newborns, the stone shard pressed between them like a talisman, its carved wolf seeming to watch with the moon's own vigilance. Sleep claimed her, not as respite, but as surrender. A fragile barrier against the encroaching dark, her breaths shallow, the pups warmer and steadier, nuzzling into her side. The wind whispered secrets through the cracks, carrying tales of a king haunted by ghosts, But Erin dreamed only of hearths she would never know, of a pack that had forsaken her for sins unspoken. Far from the frozen threshold, in the shadowed halls of Stormhold, Edric Stormborn paced the throne room like a caged beast, the weight of his crown heavier than the aurora's chill light filtering through arched windows. At 36 winters, the Alpha King of the North bore the scars of battles won and oaths unbroken, a jagged line across his jaw from a traitor's blade, eyes of gold dulled by the melancholy of rule. Guilt was his constant shadow, born of wars that had claimed too many, and duties that chained his heart to the realm's unyielding demands. The council's whispers had grown bolder of late, pressing for an heir to secure the bloodline, blind to the fleeting encounter that had haunted him since that disguised patrol months ago. An Omega's face lingered in his memory, soft features framed by wild hair, her scent like wild heather amid the pine, a momentary lapse in the vigilance he owed his people. He had sought her out in anonymity, drawn by an instinct deeper than reason, but dawn had parted them without names exchanged. Now, reports from the border huntsman shattered the night's fragile peace. Impossible tracks in the snow, tiny paw prints veined with an unnatural glow as if lit from within by royal fire. Golden-eyed whelps, the messenger had stammered, abandoned in the wastes, or so the signs suggest. Edric's blood ran cold, not from fear, but recognition. His eyes, his mark, impossible yet undeniable. He departed at once, a small cadre of loyal guards trailing his midnight steed through the mountain passes. The journey was a gauntlet of blizzard and betrayal's echo. Whispers of rival alphas circling the throne, plotting in the southern clans, made every shadow suspect. Edric rode cloaked against the wind, his mind a storm of denial and dread. What folly had he wrought? An heir, born of a stolen moment, cast into the border's maw by the very council he led? Guilt clawed deeper, a beast he could not outrun, for in the north, kings were not forgiven their hidden sins. Dawn's feeble light greeted him at the ruins, the air thick with the metallic tang of recent birth. Dismounting, Edric's boots sank into blood-tinged snow, his guards fanning out to secure the perimeter. There, in the archway's shelter, lay the woman from his memory. Erin, though he knew her not by name, her form pale and broken, two tiny bundles nestled against her. The pups stirred at his approach, their golden eyes snapping open, locking onto his with an instinctive pull that stole his breath. They were his, mirrors of his soul, vulnerable and fierce. He knelt, the wind tearing at his cloak, revealing the armored king beneath. Fear flickered in her half-lidded gaze as she roused, curiosity warring with the terror of another stranger in this forsaken place. Their scents mingled, his dominant storm, hers the quiet bloom of resilience, igniting a connection raw and unspoken, denied by the chasm of her exile and his throne. "You," he murmured, voice rough as gravel, extending a gauntleted hand, not in command, but plea. The pups whimpered, reaching toward him, and in that moment, under the moon's receding vigil, the Deuce's thread wove tighter, binding guilt to grace. Yet Erin recoiled, the stone shard glinting in her grasp, her protective fire unquenched. Who was this warrior, with eyes that echoed her children's? Trust was a luxury shattered by banishment, and curiosity a dangerous spark in the cold. Edric's heart ached with the weight of what he had unwittingly unleashed, the first fracture in his armored duty. And now I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The frost-kissed ruins cradled their fragile triad like a forgotten altar, where the moon's silver threads wove doubt into the first fragile weave of alliance. Erin's grip tightened on the stone shard, its jagged edge a whisper against her palm, as the stranger's golden eyes, mirrors to her pup's own, held her in a gaze that pierced deeper than the wind's bite. He knelt unmoving, his armored form a silhouette of shadowed power against the dawn's reluctant glow. The air between them, thick with the scent of pine and storm, laced with the metallic tang of her recent ordeal. Exhaustion clawed at her limbs, but instinct roared louder. Protect the lives she had birthed in solitude, these tiny flames with eyes that burned like forbidden embers. Who was he? This warrior whose presence stirred the air like thunder on the horizon. Fear coiled in her chest, mingling with a treacherous curiosity, for in his stare she glimpsed not conquest, but a haunted recognition that echoed her own unspoken ache. Edric's hand remained extended, gauntlet glinting with frost, his breath a steady plume in the chill. "I mean no harm," he said, voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of northern gales tempered by something softer. Regret, perhaps, or the echo of a vow unkept. The pups stirred against her, their mules pulling at him like invisible reins, their golden irises fixing on his face with an innocence that stripped away his king's facade. He had come seeking answers to the impossible tracks, but this, her, them, shattered every expectation. Guilt surged anew, a tide crashing against the bulwarks of his duty. He, who had commanded legions and quelled betrayals, now knelt before an Omega's defiance, her scent awakening memories of that stolen night, wild and unbidden. A low growl rumbled from the shadows beyond the ruins, shattering the fragile stasis. The wind carried it first, a guttural chorus, paws crunching through snow like cracking bones. The predators returned, bolder now, drawn by the fresh blood of birth and the vulnerability of new life. Their eyes gleamed yellow in the gathering dusk, a pack of gaunt wolves from the border's depths, ribs stark against matted fur, driven by the eternal hunger of the wastes. Erin's heart seized, her body too spent to rise, the stone shard her only weapon against the encroaching ring of fangs. Edric moved then, fluid as a blade drawn from sheath, his cloak flaring like raven wings as he positioned himself between her and the beasts. "Stay with them," he commanded, not harshly, but with the quiet authority of one who had stared down death's maw before. He drew a short sword from his belt, its edge catching the moon's light in a prismatic flash, and a smaller dagger he tossed gently toward her feet. An offering, not a demand. The wolves lunged in unison, a blur of gray and white against the crimson-streaked snow, their howls a dirge that vibrated through the stone. Edric met the first mid-air, his blade slicing clean through fur and sinew, blood arcing hot and steaming onto the frost. The metallic scent bloomed, sharp and visceral, mingling with the earthy musk of exertion as he pivoted, guarding the archway's narrow throat. Erin watched, transfixed as he fought, not with the brute fury of a conqueror, but with a measured grace born of battles that had scarred more than flesh. One wolf broke through, snapping toward the pups. She snatched the dagger, her arm trembling as she thrust it upward, the blade grazing the beast's muzzle in a spray of red. Pain lanced her side, reopening wounds from the birth, but she held, the stone shard in her other hand, a talisman pressed to the infant's downy fur. The pups whimpered, their tiny bodies warm against her cooling skin, their golden eyes wide with the primal dance of survival. Edric dispatched the intruder with a swift backhand strike, his gaze flicking to her, not assessing weakness, but acknowledging the fire that matched his own. The skirmish ebbed as quickly as it had surged, the surviving wolves scattering into the blizzard's veil, their yelps fading into the wind's lament. Edric sheathed his weapons, blood dripping from his gauntlets to patter like dark rain on the snow. He turned to her, chest heaving, the melancholy in his eyes deepening as he knelt once more. Closer now, the barrier of fear thinning in the aftermath's hush. "They'll return," he murmured, scanning the horizon where storm clouds gathered like conspiring shadows. "The border spares no one, but together we endure." His words hung between them, not a promise of salvation, but an invitation forged in shared blood, the first crack in her exile's armor. She hesitated, the dagger heavy in her lap, curiosity blooming amid the ache. Who was this man, whose eyes claimed kinship with her children without a word? The pups reached toward him again, their instinctive pull a bridge across the chasm of strangerhood. Aaron relented, not fully, but enough to allow him near, his warmth a tentative shield against the encroaching cold. He gathered kindling from the ruins, splintered beams etched with ancient lunar runes, and struck flint to spark a small fire in a sheltered hollow, its flames leaping like defiant spirits, casting flickering gold across their faces. The heat was a revelation, thawing the ice in her veins, and as he offered strips of dried venison from his pack, their fingers brushed. A spark of connection, raw and unbidden, stirring the memory of that hooded night. In the fire's glow, words came haltingly. She spoke of the council's verdict, the accusation that had hurled her into this void, her voice a thread of woven pain and resolve. Edric listened, his golden gaze steady, guilt etching deeper lines around his mouth as fragments of truth aligned. He revealed nothing of his crown, only the weight of a life bound by unseen chains, his melancholy a mirror to her rejection. Empathy stirred, slow as melting rime, transforming fear into a fragile bond, not love, but the recognition that in the North's unforgiving heart, survival demanded trust's quiet surrender. The fire crackled, its warmth a fleeting mercy, as distant howls probed the night once more. But within the ruin's embrace, under the moon's watchful eye, Aaron felt the first stirrings of alliance, her pup's breaths sinking with his, the stone shard resting between them like a vow unspoken. What was strength if not choosing vulnerability amid the storm? The wind whispered of greater threats, rivals' shadows lengthening from the south, but for this breath refuge held, a sanctuary carved from blood and flame. And now I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The fire's embers pulsed like a captured heartbeat in the ruin's hollow, casting elongated shadows that danced across the frost-veined walls, where lunar runes seemed to stir under the moon's insistent gaze. Aaron sat huddled with her pups, nestled against her chest, their golden eyes half-lidded in the warmth's fragile embrace, tiny paws kneading her skin as if anchoring her to this improbable sanctuary. The stranger, Edric, though she still knew him only by the storm in his scent, had withdrawn to the fire's edge, his armored shoulders bowed under an invisible yoke, golden irises reflecting the flame's flicker like distant auroras. The venison's salt lingered on her tongue, a stark contrast to the blood's coppery echo from the skirmish, but trust remained a tentative thread, woven from necessity rather than certainty. Her body ached with the birth's aftermath, fever's haze lifting only to reveal the deeper chill of questions unspoken. Why had he come? And why did his presence feel like a key turning in a lock she had long forgotten? Night deepened, the wind's howl softening to a mournful sigh that carried the faint, rhythmic thrum of something ancient. Perhaps the Deuce's pulse beneath the ice, or the pup's synchronized breaths syncing with the stranger's own. Aaron traced the stone shard's edge absently, its carved wolf now warmed by the fire, the bloodstains flaking away like shed sins. Sleep tugged at her, but a restlessness stirred, deeper than exhaustion. A prickle along her spine, as if the moon's light pierced her skin, seeking the hidden veins of her soul. She had always sensed it, this whisper from the old tales. The Pathfinder's gift, bestowed on Omegas cast adrift, a vision that unveiled paths through deception and despair. Dismissed as myth by the pack, it had slumbered within her, unawakened until Exile's forge demanded its fire. The pups whimpered suddenly, their golden eyes snapping open, not in fear, but in eerie unison, staring past the flames toward the shadowed crevasses beyond the ruins. Edric tensed, hand drifting to his sword hilt, his melancholy gaze sharpening into vigilance. "What is it?" he murmured, voice a low rumble that vibrated through the cold air, stirring the embers to brighter life. Aaron followed their stare, and there it came. A surge, visceral as the contractions that had birthed them, flooding her veins with liquid silver. The world tilted, the fire's glow bleeding into the moon's pallor, and her vision fractured like ice under pressure. No longer confined to the ruins she saw, threads of fate unfurling across the tundra, silver paths veined with blood-red warnings, leading from this forsaken threshold to the heart of the north. Stormhold's spires, wreathed in aurora and intrigue. In the vision's grip, faces materialized, sharp as shards. The council elders, their eyes cold as glacial steel, plotting in torchlit halls with whispers of betrayal. A rival alpha, his fur brindled with southern scars, circled the throne like a shadow wolf, hungry for the crown Edric bore unseen. And there, woven through it all, the Pups, her son and daughter, grown to fierce youths with eyes that commanded loyalty, their blood a bridge mending the fractures of war-torn packs. But the paths diverged. One of isolation, where Edric's guilt consumed him, the realm splintering into civil strife. Another, where mercy's hand, hers, guided him through the storm, redeeming the king's hidden shame with a union that defied hierarchies. The Deusa's voice echoed in the ether, not words but a sensation, cool and inexorable. The forsaken bear the light, the burdened king must choose. Aaron gasped, the vision releasing her with a jolt that sent snow skittering from the archway. Her eyes flew open, tears freezing on her lashes, the stone shard glowing faintly in her grasp. Or was it illusion? The Pups nuzzled closer, their warmth grounding her, while Edric leaned forward, his face etched with a dawning awe that cracked his stoic mask. "You saw," he breathed. Not a question but a revelation, his golden gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that stripped away pretenses. For in that moment he recognized it, the Pathfinder's mark, the rare gift that had eluded seers and shamans alike. Manifesting now in this exiled Omega whose scent had haunted him since their unnamed tryst. She was no mere survivor, she was the key, the Deusa's instrument to unravel the knots of his destiny, binding his heirs to a throne teetering on betrayal's edge. He reached out, not to claim, but to steady, his gauntleted fingers brushing hers around the shard. The contact sparked, a rush of shared insight, his own suppressed visions flickering in response, memories of that patrol, the pull toward her amid the disguise, the guilt that had festered into a chasm. The tracks, the eyes, he confessed, voice fracturing like thin ice. They led me here, but you light the way through the dark I cannot face alone. Melancholy deepened in his features, the weight of his crown no longer abstract. She had unveiled it, the rival's shadow encroaching, the council's verdict a poison born of their fear of true bloodlines. Aaron's heart raced, the vision's echoes stirring a profound ache, not fear, but the gravity of purpose. She had birthed more than Pups. She had awakened to her role, the rejected Omega whose gift could crown or shatter kingdoms. Yet doubt lingered, a cold undercurrent to the fire's heat. Was this redemption or another chain? The Pups cooed softly, their golden stares bridging them, instinctive and unyielding. Edric's touch withdrew, respect in the distance he allowed, his ethical core demanding no coercion, only the choice mercy forged. The moon climbed higher, its light bathing the ruins in prismatic clarity, illuminating the silver threads only she could now perceive, paths of compassion amid the gathering storm of politics and war. In her chest, the Pathfinder's whisper settled. Strength was not in wielding power, but in revealing it to those who bore its burden. As distant Weavos probed the night, a reminder of threats unseen, Aaron felt the bond deepen, not into love's blaze, but a spiritual tether. Her gift, the flame that illuminated his shadowed throne. The wind carried a faint, ominous rumble from the south. Hoofbeats, perhaps, or the growl of approaching foes. But within the fire's circle, revelation hung like a suspended breath, the stone shard pulsing with newfound light between them. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw the moon's sickle edge sliced through the storm clouds, gathering like vengeful specters over the border's jagged spine, casting erratic silver gleams on the snow that swirled in furious eddies. Aaron clutched the stone shard tighter, its carved wolf now a conduit for the visions that still hummed in her veins like latent thunder. The pup's warmth against her, a fragile anchor amid the encroaching rumble from the south. Edric stood at the ruin's threshold, his silhouette etched against the blizzard's fury, sword half drawn as the distant thunder resolved into the thunder of hooves. A hunting party. Their torches flickering like malevolent stars, banners snapping in the gale with the emblem of Stormhold's council. A crowned wolf in iron gray. The air thickened with the scent of oiled leather and steel, overlaid by the acrid bite of betrayal, as riders crested the nearest ridge, their breaths pluming in disciplined unison. She rose unsteadily, the dagger at her belt a cold weight, her body protesting the birth's toll with every shift, but the Pathfinder's gift sharpened her senses to a blade's edge, threads of fate unraveled before her inner eye. Crimson veins pulsing toward this confrontation, forking into paths of fracture or fragile unity. The lead rider dismounted with predatory grace, his fur cloak ermine-trimmed, face gaunt and scarred by old feuds. Lord Kale, the council's enforcer, eyes like chips of glacial flint, the traitor whose whispers had poisoned the verdict against her. He had always coveted the throne's shadow, allying with southern rivals to undermine Edric's rule. And now his gaze locked on the king, feigning surprise that masked a serpent's calculation. "Stormborn," Kale called, voice carrying over the wind like a false clarion. "The council hunts anomalies in the wastes, golden tracks that mock our bloodlines. What folly brings you to this grave?" Edric's stance hardened, the melancholy in his golden eyes hardening to forged steel, though guilt flickered beneath, a shadow of the hidden tryst that had birthed this storm. He stepped forward, shielding Aaron and the pups without a word, his presence a bulwark against the encroaching circle of armed guards, their armor glinting with frost-laced menace. "The anomaly is the council's own venom," he replied, tone measured yet resonant, echoing off the ice like a judgment from the Deuce's lips. "You condemned an innocent to die for sins you fabricated, Kael. These whelps, my whelps, bear the North's true fire, not your diluted schemes." The revelation hung raw in the frigid air, the pups' soft whines underscoring it, their golden stares piercing the torchlight as if claiming kinship before words could twist it. Kale's laugh was a bark, devoid of mirth, his hand signaling archers to knock arrows, the creak of bows a visceral threat amid the howling wind. Aaron felt the threads tighten, her vision pulsing. Kale's betrayal unveiled in full, alliances with the rival Alpha from the southern clans, a brindled brute named Thorn, whose armies massed beyond the passes, hungry for the North's frozen crown. Documents forged, witnesses bought, her exile a pawn to erase any trace of Edric's unguarded moment, lest it legitimize a union that shattered their power plays. The stone shard warmed in her grasp, the carved wolf seeming to growl silently, urging her to speak the paths she saw. War's red flood, swallowing packs in civil strife, or forgiveness's narrow vein where mercy disarmed the blade before it fell. But doubt clawed at her resolve, a deeper chill than the snow seeping through her cloak. Freedom whispered of fleeing into the border's maw, raising her pups beyond thrones and treacheries, their golden eyes a private legacy untainted by royal chains. Love, or what stirred in Edric's haunted gaze, a redemption she both craved and feared, demanded confrontation, binding her gift to his duty, risking all for a realm that had spat her out. The pups stirred against her, sensing the tension, their tiny forms pressing closer as if to remind her of the blood they shared, the instinctive pull toward the king who knelt for them in the ruins. What was compassion, if not choosing to illuminate the dark, even when it scorched the hand that held the light? Kale advanced, his boots crunching bloodied snow from the earlier fray, a sneer twisting his features as he eyed Aaron with predatory disdain. An omega whore and mongrel pups? The council will not abide this farce. Edric, step aside or join her in exile. Permanent. The guards shifted, swords whispering from sheaths, the metallic tang sharpening the air, mingling with the distant weavos of Thorn's scouts probing the flanks. Edric's hand tightened on his hilt, his ethical core warring visibly. The king who had quelled wars with mercy now faced the poison at his heart. Guilt for her suffering, a forge tempering rage into resolve. He glanced back at Aaron, his golden eyes a plea wrapped in command. Choose with me, or flee without. The Pathfinder's surge crested again, silver threads coiling around Kyle like invisible nooses, revealing his feigned loyalty as a veil over ambition. Aaron stepped forward, voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs, the stone shard raised like a seer's staff. "The Diusa sees your threads, traitor," she intoned, the words flowing unbidden, laced with the moon's inexorable calm. "Thorn's shadow clings to you, his gold in your coffers, his blades at your borders. End this, Kale, and find mercy's path, or war will claim you first." The guards faltered, murmurs rippling like cracks in ice, for the gift's aura shimmered faintly around her, the moon's light bending to halo the shard in ethereal glow. Kale recoiled, eyes widening in superstitious dread, the rival's plot exposed in her gaze's unyielding mirror. Edric seized the fracture, lunging not to kill, but to disarm, his blade clashing against Kale's in a shower of sparks that lit the snow like falling stars. The enforcer parried, fury twisting his snarl, but the guards hesitated, loyalty fracturing under the weight of unveiled truth. Aaron shielded the pups, her heart a tumult of fear and fierce clarity. Forgiveness tempted, a chance to spare blood for the North's sake, yet liberty screamed of severing ties before the throne's gravity pulled her under. Edric pressed the advantage, his strikes precise, forcing Kale to his knees in a spray of crimson that steamed on the frost. "Yield," the king growled, blade at the traitor's throat, "and face the council's true judgment, or die here and let war devour us all." Kyle spat blood, defiance crumbling to calculation, his surrender a bitter rasp. "Mercy. For now." The guards lowered weapons, the standoff ebbing into uneasy truce. But Aaron's vision forked sharper. Pardoning him risked deeper betrayal, while execution ignited immediate war, Thorn's hordes descending like an avalanche. The wind howled its indecision, carrying the scent of impending rain turned to sleet as she met Edric's gaze across the bloodied snow. Love or freedom? Forgiveness or the blade? The pup's golden eyes watched, innocent arbiters, and in that suspended breath, the Diusa's whisper pressed. True strength lay not in the choice alone, but in the sacrifice it demanded, a moral forge where hearts were remade or rent asunder. The storm broke then, sleet lashing like judgment's tears, blurring the lines between ally and foe as the party retreated into the night, Kale bound and dragged southward. But the rumble lingered in Aaron's chest, a spiritual quake. Had she chosen redemption's path, or merely delayed the war's inevitable howl? Edric returned to her side, his touch tentative on her shoulder, the weight of unspoken vows hanging heavier than the crown he still concealed. Under the moon's fractured gaze, the ruins stood as witness to the trial's fragile close, where past sins clashed with future flames, leaving only the echo of a choice that could crown or condemn them all. Sleet clung to the ruins like the Diusa's reluctant tears, washing the blood from the snow in rivulets that traced silver paths toward unseen depths, mirroring the fractured choices etched in Erin's soul. The storm's fury ebbed into a hushed vigil, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet stone and smoldering resolve as Edric's guards secured the perimeter, their torches sputtering against the wind's dying breath. Erin stood within the archway's cradle, the pups bundled against her, their golden eyes reflecting the moon's fractured light like twin beacons in the gloom. Kale's surrender hung in the balance, a brittle truce that the Pathfinder's visions warned could shatter at dawn's first blush. Thorn's southern hordes already stirring beyond the passes, their war cries a distant thunder promising to engulf the north in crimson tides. Yet in this suspended mercy, Erin's heart warred not with blades, but with the deeper wound of belonging, to flee into the border's eternal wilds. Her gift a solitary flame for her children alone, or to bind it to the king's shadowed throne, sacrificing the freedom of exile for a redemption that might heal them all. Edric approached slowly, his cloak sodden and torn, the weight of his concealed crown pressing like an invisible yoke upon his shoulders. Blood flecked his jaw where Kale's desperate strike had grazed, a thin line that wept red against his pale skin, but his golden gaze held no triumph, only the melancholy depth of a man who had glimpsed his own unraveling. He knelt before her, not as ruler, but as supplicant, his gauntleted hand hovering near the stone shard she still clutched, its carved wolf now pulsing with an inner warmth that seemed to echo the pup's quickening breaths. "The paths you unveiled. They spare us for now," he murmured, voice roughened by the night's toll, carrying the faint tremor of vulnerability he had long armored against. "But the council awaits in Stormhold, their venom deeper than Kale's blade. They condemned you for my hidden folly, Erin, my disguise that night, the touch I could not deny. I am Edric Stormborn, king of these frozen realms, and these whelps. They are my heirs, born of a moment when duty cracked, and my heart claimed what the throne forbade." The revelation landed like a stone in still water, rippling through her with a chill sharper than the sleet. The stranger from her fevered memories solidified into this ethical specter, melancholy king, guilt-haunted guardian, his golden eyes no longer mystery but legacy, mirroring the fire in her children's stares. Rage flickered, hot and fleeting, for the council's cruelty stemmed from his silence, yet beneath it bloomed a profound ache, recognition of the bond that had stirred that night, resisted now by the chasm of hierarchies and betrayals. The pups whined softly, reaching toward him with instinctive paws, their warmth bridging the space as if the Deusa herself urged unity. Erin's fingers tightened on the shard, drawing a bead of her own blood that welled and froze, a visceral reminder of sacrifices already made. Birth in isolation, defiance against predators, visions that burdened her with fates not her own. From the south, the rumble swelled anew, not storm, but summons. Edric's loyal cadre returning from scouting, their faces grim under hoods laced with ice. "The council's emissaries ride hard, my liege," one reported, breath fogging the air like a prophecy. "Word of Kale's capture spreads. They demand your return with the anomaly in chains." The words struck Erin like a lash. Anomaly, not queen, not mother, but the Omega they had banished to erase their shame. Visions surged unbidden, the Pathfinder's gift flaring in silver threads that wove through the group. Paths of war, where Thorn's brindled forces clashed with northern steel in valleys choked with blood and fire, the pups orphaned in the fray, or Healing's vein, narrow and arduous, where her voice in Stormhold's halls exposed the rot. Mercy crowning Edric not through conquest, but through the union of rejected and ruler, her gift illuminating truths that mended fractured packs. Doubt coiled tighter, a serpent in her chest, freedom's call to vanish into the wilds, raising her heirs beyond thrones that devoured the vulnerable, their golden eyes a private sun against the eternal winter. Yet Edric's gaze held her, not with command, but with the raw plea of a soul marked by loss, wars that had widowed too many, duties that isolated him in guilt's forge. "I cannot mend what I broke alone," he confessed, the words a quiet thunder, his hand finally closing over hers on the shard, the contact a spark that ignited shared warmth, chasing the cold from her veins. "You are no pawn, Aaron, no seductress, but the Deuce's light in my shadowed reign. Choose with me, return, reveal the paths, and let compassion temper the blade. Or go, and I will shield your flight with my last breath. But know this, the North bleeds without you, as I have since that night." The pups nuzzled into the space between them, their scents mingling, storm and heather, king and exile, forging an instinctive union that tugged at her resolve. What was love, if not this resisted flame, rationalized as duty, yet blooming in the ache of mutual redemption? The wind sighed its approval, carrying the faint weevo of wolves, not predatory, but choral, as if the moon's guardians witnessed her turning point. Aaron met his eyes, the stone shard bridging their palms like a vow etched in blood and ice, its wolf carving seeming to breathe under the lunar glow. Sacrifice whispered of loss, the wild's freedom for the throne's peril, but union promised healing. Her gift the salve for his guilt, the pups the bridge to a realm reborn in mercy over power. As dawn's pale fingers clawed the horizon, painting the snow in hues of rose and steel, Aaron nodded, the choice settling like snow's quiet blanket. "We return," she whispered, voice steady amid the tremor of her heart, not as captive, but as the light that unmasks the dark. For them, she glanced at the pups, their golden stares fierce and unyielding, and for the mercy that crowns the fallen. Edric rose, pulling her gently into the circle of his cloak, the triad complete in that fragile embrace, as the guards formed ranks around them. The journey south began, hooves churning the sleet into muddied resolve, the stone shard tucked into her bodice like a beating heart. Betrayals loomed in Stormhold's spires, Thorn's shadow lengthening, but in this Renascimento, forged of choice and quiet union, Aaron felt the Deuce's breath stir anew, redemption not as reward, but as the fire that tempered souls into something unbreakable. Yet as the ruins faded behind, swallowed by the blizzard's veil, a final vision flickered, flames of war licking the horizon, demanding one last sacrifice to seal the healing. The moon watched, silent arbiter, as the king and his forsaken queen rode toward destiny's forge, their bond aflame against the gathering night. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive. The aurora's serpentine ribbons unfurled across the northern sky like the Deuce's veiled decree, bathing Stormhold's ice-hewn spires in ethereal greens and violets, as if the heavens themselves mourned the fragile peace forged on the border's bloodied snow. Aaron rode beside Edric through the mountain gates, the pups swaddled in a fur-lined cradle strapped to her chest, their golden eyes peeking out with a quiet ferocity that mirrored the king's own. The stone shard rested against her skin, warm as a pulse, its carved wolf a silent sentinel amid the jolting rhythm of hooves on frost-cracked paths. Exhaustion clung to her like rime, the birth's echoes still thrumming in her limbs, but the Pathfinder's gift sharpened every sense, the metallic tang of torch smoke from the walls, the low murmur of gathered packs below, and the undercurrent of dread coiling through the air like smoke from a hidden pyre. Stormhold loomed, its great hall a cavern of ancient stone veined with silver ore, where the council's banners hung limp in the chill draft, crowned wolves now symbols of division rather than unity. Edric dismounted first, his hand steadying her with a touch that lingered, conveying not possession, but the shared weight of what lay ahead. His golden gaze, etched with the melancholy of a reign scarred by unspoken losses, met hers in a moment of raw communion. "The forge awaits," he murmured, voice a gravelly whisper amid the wind's sigh. "But your light tempers the steel." She nodded, the choice she had made on the sleet-lashed ruins solidifying into resolve, union over isolation, her gift the salve for his guilt, even if it demanded the ultimate sacrifice. Freedom's whisper had faded. In its place bloomed a resisted flame, rationalized as duty, yet kindling deeper, a redemption born of mutual vulnerability. The hall erupted in murmurs as they entered, the council elders rising from their thrones of carved bone, faces gaunt with feigned outrage. Kale, bound in iron chains at their center, spat defiance from bruised lips, his glacial eyes flicking to Aaron with venomous recognition. Beyond the arched windows, shadows stirred, Thorn's southern vanguard cresting the outer ridges, their brindled banners snapping like predators' jaws. War drums, a distant heartbeat promising deluge. The air thickened with the scent of oiled steel and fear sweat, torches flaring in iron sconces to cast elongated shadows that clawed across the flagstones. Aaron's pups stirred against her, their whines a soft counterpoint to the rising clamor, golden stares fixing on the assembly as if already claiming the legacy denied. Traitor to the bloodline. Elder Varen snarled, his voice cracking like thin ice, gnarled fist pounding the council table. "You bring this banished wretch and her mongrels to defile the throne? Kale's whispers ring true. Your folly weakens us as Thorn's hordes descend." The elders nodded, their auras dark in her vision, crimson threads of ambition veining toward the rival's shadow. Alliances forged in secret to topple Edric and install a puppet crown. Kyle laughed, a hollow rasp, chains rattling like bones in a gale. "She seduced you in shadows, Stormborn, and now parades bastards as heirs. Strike her down and reclaim your rule before the South devours us." Edric stepped forward, his armored form a bastion of quiet authority, the jagged scar on his jaw catching the torchlight like a badge of endured pain. Guilt shadowed his features, the weight of her exile a fresh wound amid the old. Wars that had claimed his kin, duties that had isolated him in ethical solitude. "No," he declared, voice resonant as thunder rolling through the hall. "The folly is yours, Council of Serpents. Aaron Frostvale is no seductress, but the Deuce's chosen, the Pathfinder whose visions expose your rot. These pups bear my eyes, my blood, legitimized by the moon's own witness. Condemn her, and you condemn the North to Thorn's blade." Chaos ignited, elders shouting, guards shifting uneasily as Thorn's drums swelled closer, the ground vibrating with the horde's approach. Aaron felt the Pathfinder's surge crest, silver threads exploding in her mind's eye, paths forking in visceral clarity, the crimson flood of battle, bodies piling in snow-choked passes, the pups orphaned amid the carnage, or the narrow vein of sacrifice where mercy's blade cut deeper than steel, healing the fractures through loss. Her heart seized, the stone shard burning against her chest, drawing a thin line of blood that seeped warm through her bodice. The pups' scents, milk and wild earth, grounded her, their instinctive nuzzles a reminder of the bond that transcended thrones. Thorn himself burst through the southern gates then, a brindled behemoth flanked by snarling warriors, his eyes like coals in a forge of ambition. "The North crumbles under weak blood," he bellowed, sword raised, the clash erupting in a whirlwind of steel and snarls. Edric met him mid-hall, blades singing in a deadly ballet, blood spraying hot across the stone, his, Thorns mingling in visceral arcs that steamed in the chill. Aaron backed toward a shadowed alcove, shielding the pups, but the vision demanded more. To intervene was to risk all. Her gift, unveiling the traitor's hidden daggers poised at Adric's back. Kale lunged from his chains, freed by a bribed guard, his blade arcing toward the king's unguarded flank. time fractured. Eren surged forward, the stone shard in her fist, thrusting it into Kale's path, a desperate barrier that grazed his arm, drawing his blood in a crimson spray that painted her face. Pain lanced her side as his counterstrike bit deep, a gash blooming red against her ribs, but she held, the Pathfinder's light flaring around her like lunar fire. "See the threads!" she gasped, voice a clarion amid the fray, silver visions projecting into the elders' minds, irrefutable proofs of betrayal, coffers filled with southern gold, pacts sealed in blood oaths. The guards faltered, turning on Kale and his allies, the tide shifting in a roar of loyalty reclaimed. Edric dispatched Thorn with a final, merciful thrust, not to the heart, but to subdue, the rival crumpling in a heap of fur and defeat, his horde breaking against the wall's unyielding steel. But victory's cost pressed. Eren's wound wept freely, her vision blurring with blood loss and the pups' frantic cries, their golden eyes wide with terror. Edric dropped to her side, his hands pressing the gash, guilt etching his face like fresh scars. The king who had failed to protect her even in Union's fragile dawn. "No," he whispered, voice breaking, the hall falling silent around them, elders kneeling in dawning awe. She cupped his face, blood-smeared fingers tracing the scar on his jaw. The resisted love blooming fully now, accepted in this forge of sacrifice. "It is done," she breathed, the stone shard slipping into his palm, its warmth transferring like a dying ember. "My light, for your crown. Heal the north, Edric, with mercy, not my shadow." The pups nuzzled between them, their warmth a bridge as darkness tugged at her edges, the deuce's whisper a cool balm. Renascimento through loss, union eternal in spirit, if not flesh. Edric's howl of anguish echoed, raw and redemptive, as healers rushed forward, but in her fading gaze she saw the paths converge, a realm mended, heirs raised in compassion's light, his guilt transmuted to guardianship. The aurora brightened, weaving their triad into legend as Eren's breath steadied under the moon's embrace, sacrificed the seed of their unbreakable flame. Stormholds stood reborn, thrones tempered by blood and choice, the forsaken Omega's gift crowning the fallen king in quiet, eternal union. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.